Hi, welcome. This is going to be my first devotional that I've done on the channel. We're kind of out here in the pasture, and I got my Bible with me. A little bit about me, I guess, and my background. I was raised up in the Assembly of God and Church of God. Was part of the Baptist Student Union when I was in college. We're from the conservative side of it. I know a lot of it sits within the Pentecostal realm, the kind of switched to the charismatic movement and the prosperity preachers. I'm not part of that group. More the conservative part. But anyway, today I've got kind of a different one than most people talk about, and it says, I do not pray for the world. The story starts up, or the verse starts up in John chapter 17, starting verse 6. And Jesus has just went to the Passover, had the Passover meal with the disciples. Now they're going toward Gethsemane, the Garden of Gethsemane, and they haven't crossed over the brook yet. And he stops and he prays. He's praying for his disciples. So his 12 disciples are with him, and maybe some others, I'm not sure. But in verse 6, he says, I have manifested your name to the men whom thou hast given me out of the world. They are yours. You gave them to me, and they have kept your word. So these are the true Christians, these are the disciples. Now they have known that all things which you have given me are from you. For I have given to them the words which you have given to me, and they have received them, and have known surely that I come forth from you, and they have believed that you sent me. I pray for them. I do not pray for the world, but for those whom you have given me, for they are yours. Now, what this means, I'm all for mission work. Jesus is all for mission work. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about we shouldn't pray for the lost. We shouldn't pray for those that's outside the faith. But in Jesus' most trying times, when everything was, he knew what was fixing. He knew what was fixing to happen. He was fixing to go to the cross. At that point in time, he's not praying for the world. He's not praying for those that aren't hearing him. He's not praying for those that don't know him. He's praying for his disciples. One mistake that we've made in the world, in the church today, is we want to have converts. We want to convert people. We go out and we talk about how many converts did you have? God did not call us to bring in converts. When he says go out into the world, and he says teach the world, but really he's saying make disciples. Because the word teach back then, I didn't look up that verse, but the word teach back then actually meant like a disciple. You would teach like you would teach somebody a trade. So this is who he's praying for. These are people that have committed their lives to Jesus and to God the Father, to serve him. And why I bring that up, I was a youth pastor for about 8 years, 3 different churches. And not by choice, it's the way things worked out. But in that, if you weren't careful, you would spend all your time with kind of people that were converts, that kind of was in the group, but they were more interested in chasing the girls and chasing the guys and playing ball and all that. But what I always tried to do in my time was I tried to spend my time with the ones that were true believers. And one thing that I remember hearing the preacher say, that he'd heard another preacher say, I believe it was, that he was an older preacher, and he said, what advice would you give me? And the older preacher said, always remember, he said, don't make the mistake that he made. He said, in the attempt to save the world, in the attempt to build the church, he said, I lost my own family. I lost those who were closest to me because I was always spending my time trying to reach the lost, trying to go the extra mile, and I didn't take care of the ones that he loved the most. And to me, that was a tragedy. It's a very sad thing. So what I'm really trying to bring up tonight is don't forget those that God's given you. This is for Christians. If you're a Christian and you got somebody that loves God, don't neglect him to go out and try to reach somebody else that doesn't even care about God. As a youth pastor, if you did that, you're doomed, because you're going to have problems, you're going to have headaches. So again, I'm all for missions. This is an anti-mission talk. It's just don't forget, because so many preachers have lost their families, have lost those close to them. Why? Because they neglected them. remember when I was several years ago, my oldest son, number 3 son is Vim today, but my oldest son, he's moved off now. We were getting together some videos, and it was for a youth camp that one of the girls that we knew was going. She was college age. She was going to go as a counselor. She wanted some videos. So we got together our Christian videos. We was going to give them to her so she could take to camp. Well, as we're getting these videos together, I look at Brian, who was about that same age. She's going to teach us. Well, how about this guy? Do you really like the way he preaches? I think it was Dave Reaver. I don't like him. I said, well, wait a minute, son. And he starts throwing a fit. And I stopped and said, no, what's wrong, son? You know this man, he's a man of God, okay? Yeah, okay. And he looks at me and kind of says, I said, but Dad, I don't want you to be a youth pastor again. And he said with tears in his eyes, he said, I don't want to go through that again. And I kind of laughed to a point, and I said, son, you got it mixed up. I said, Rebecca needs some videos for her youth camp. I said, I don't plan on being a youth pastor again. And I did make a promise to him. Some people say I was wrong for doing this, but really it never really came up again. But I said, son, I'll make this promise to you. I won't be a youth pastor again unless I get you're okay. I'll tell you first before anything else happens. I said, but I have no plans of going back into youth ministry because I've got, I was now getting teenagers of my own. And I said, I need to spend time with y'all. Because throughout his life, we became youth pastors when my wife was pregnant with him. So for his first 6, 7 years of his life, that's all he knew was us being youth pastors and going and really neglecting them. And then later, I became youth pastor for, well, almost a year. And again, and it was a big youth group. Now, I never got paid for any of this, being a youth pastor. But there were like 35 kids. And we were running like chicken with their heads cut off. I mean, we were going, we were running, we were going. And they got neglected. And I didn't realize that until then. I do remember one youth pastor I really thought the world of. And he was one time talking, he said how he handled that. Because somebody asked, what did your wife do? And he kind of looked down and said, my wife, what was your job in the church? I said, well, my wife is my wife. That's her only job. I said, she wasn't called to be a youth pastor. He was. And he said she really gets intimidated with it was a big youth group, had about 400 people in it. She said she got really intimidated with big groups. I used to try to get her to give announcements or to do this and do that. She hated it. She'd go home crying at night. And I said, but you got to do it. You're my wife. And finally it dawned on him, yeah, that's right. She's my wife. She's not my assistant. She's not my youth pastor assistant. She's my wife. He said he also made a deal. And he said with his own family, he said Sunday afternoon was family time for them. And he said, I told you young people, I said, unless it's life or death, do not call me on Sunday afternoon. Told the church that. This is our time. Well, he said his son really liked to watch football, and they would get together and watch football. And so they didn't have any particular team. They would look at the game, and they would kind of pick whichever team they would go for. It's never necessarily the same team, and they root for that team because football is really boring if you don't root for a certain team. And as they're watching the game, the phone rings, and the phone just has to be right beside him because that was back whenever phones were connected to a cord. And he picks up the phone and say, hey, what do you need? And the guy, I said, what are you doing? And he said, without thinking, I says, I'm watching football with my son. And the person on the other line says, oh, good, you're not doing anything. You need to come over here. I've got problems with my son. He's throwing a fit, and we're having problems. You need to come over here and counsel with us. And he stops and says, no, you didn't understand. I didn't say I wasn't doing anything. I'm spending time with my son watching football. Well, that's not important. You need to come over here now because we've got problems. And he stops and he said, he hesitated. I said, you're the one that don't understand. He said, if I get up right now and I go help out your problem because your son's acting up, who's going to come help me when my son starts acting up because I'm neglecting him? And he says, in all honesty, maybe if you would have thought that it wasn't so important to spend time with your son, you might not be having these problems. He said, now I will meet with you on Monday morning. It's no problem. We'll counsel. But this afternoon, I'm going to spend time with my son. That's all I'm saying. Don't neglect those that are close around you just because you got a ministry, just because you've got, you're a youth pastor, your Sunday school teacher. Spend time with those that mean the most to you, because at the end of the day, what a tragic story it would be if you saved the world but lost your kids. And don't believe that, there's a scripture up there that says, if you raise them up in the way of the Lord, that they'll never depart. You need to go back and read that whole chapter, okay? Because I'm telling you, God doesn't have grandchildren. God doesn't have, it's every person's choice whether or not to go to heaven or hell. You know, my son watching the video, I've always told him, I can't get you to heaven. You know, just because I'm your father doesn't mean you're going to go to heaven. Just because you go to church every day don't mean you're going to heaven. Just because you're a preacher's kid don't mean you're going to heaven. Every person has to make that decision. So don't take it for granted and think, well, I raised them in church. Because God doesn't ask us for converts. He asks us to make disciples. So when you find somebody that's really going out for God, make sure don't neglect the disciples around you. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If y'all like it, put down a like, make a comment, and you know, I'm going to see how this goes, this brand new thing that I'm doing, and see if anybody enjoys my take on stuff, because I do tend to take things a little bit different than a lot of other people do. But I've been in it for a long time. I was raised in church, but I also seen the other side, the good and the bad in the church. So anyway, thanks for listening. See you next time.